"Get the old seal into the van now," shouted Victoria, her designer heels digging into our lawn as her fake officers zip-tied my 72-year-old grandfather. Blood trickled from his temple where they'd shoved him against the wall. "Your lawyer grandson can't save you this time," she sneered, flashing fraudulent court papers. I filmed everything from behind my curtains, fury and satisfaction mixing as their every action triggered hidden cameras. I'm James Mitchell, the housing attorney who exposed HOA corruption last year. My Navy SEAL grandfather survived 3 Vietnam tours only to be assaulted on American soil for building a veterans memorial fountain. What these fake HOA cops didn't know: their raid wasn't a surprise. It was the culmination of my 3-month HOA sting operation. You have 12 hours to sign over your deed or your grandfather faces elder abuse charges, Victoria threatened, unaware that FBI agents were already receiving our live stream. As their black SUV pulled away with Grandpa Joe, I activated a sequence of automated legal filings designed to trap them so completely that no corrupt judge or official could save them. The moment they seized my grandfather, the perfect legal trap I'd set began closing around a $30 million criminal enterprise. The signs of trouble started 3 months ago, after our community celebrated the 1-year anniversary of our victory against Margaret Wilson. We'd established a transparent HOA board with fair rules, and even won a state award for community governance. That's when the first anonymous complaint arrived at the county office, claiming our veteran-built wheelchair ramps violated building codes. As I investigated, I discovered Victoria Caldwell had quietly purchased 3 properties in our neighborhood through shell companies. Unlike her sister Margaret's brash approach, Victoria operated with calculated precision. She'd been a corporate attorney before mysteriously resigning amid ethics violations that disappeared from the Bar Association records. "They're building something bigger than before," Grandpa Joe warned during our weekly chess game. Margaret was just the local enforcer, Victoria's the strategist. His instincts from special operations had never failed him. I began documenting everything: hidden cameras at strategic points around our property, voice-activated recorders disguised as everyday objects, a dedicated secure server storing every neighborhood interaction. I even hired private investigator Sarah Chen, an ex-FBI forensic accountant who'd helped bust HOA fraud rings across 3 states. The intimidation escalated weekly. First, it was routine inspections from fake county officials targeting only homes of veterans or elderly residents who had opposed Margaret. Then came the anonymous letters threatening eminent domain for a community improvement project. Most disturbing were the late-night drive-bys in vehicles with tinted windows. When Mrs. Rodriguez's little free library was vandalized with threatening notes about knowing your place, I connected her home to our security system. The cameras caught Victoria's associate, a disgraced former judge named Raymond Holt, smashing the replacement library at 3 a.m. while speaking on the phone. Caldwell wants more pressure. Target the old seal next. I called an emergency meeting with trusted neighbors. "They're deliberately provoking us," I explained, showing the footage. "They want us to react emotionally rather than legally." Mrs. Rodriguez, still shaken, asked the question everyone feared: "Can they really take our homes?" "Not if we're prepared," I assured them, revealing only part of my strategy. What I didn't share was that Sarah had uncovered Victoria's network, 12 corrupt HOA boards across the state, all connected to a development company planning to bulldoze established neighborhoods for luxury condos, or that I'd been feeding selective information to my contacts at the state attorney general's office. The breaking point came when they began targeting Grandpa Joe directly. First with fines for noise violations during his PTSD support group, meetings for fellow veterans, then fabricated water usage complaints. The psychological warfare was calculated. Victoria knew from HOA records which days marked the anniversaries of his combat losses. Despite my legal background, local officials wouldn't act without irrefutable evidence of criminal activity. We needed Victoria and her fake HOA cops to cross the line so dramatically that no amount of connections could protect them. "We need to set the trap," Grandpa Joe said one evening, his voice steady despite the stress taking a visible toll. "Use me as bait." "Absolutely not," I protested. "We'll find another way." He placed a weathered hand on my shoulder. "Son, sometimes you have to risk the queen to checkmate the king. I've survived 3 tours and worse bullies than Victoria Caldwell." That night, we engineered the perfect legal trap, complete with multiple fail-safes, backup plans, and emergency protocols. If Victoria's crew took the bait, they'd face federal charges. I made calls to journalists, trusted law enforcement, and even Senator Collins' office, who had been investigating corrupt development practices nationwide. The next morning, Grandpa Joe began building a memorial fountain in our front yard, dedicated to fallen seals and intentionally violating 3 of Victoria's fabricated HOA rules. We didn't have to wait long. Within hours, Victoria arrived with her fake enforcement team exactly as predicted. By order of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association Emergency Enforcement Division, this property is being condemned for multiple safety violations, Victoria announced, her voice carrying to the neighbors watching from windows. Her fake officers zip-tied Grandpa Joe's hands despite his calm compliance. The occupant is being detained for questioning regarding threats against HOA officials. This was the moment we'd anticipated, but nothing prepares you for watching your hero being treated like a criminal. I stepped forward, phone recording. "You have no legal authority to detain anyone. Release him immediately." Raymond Holt, the disgraced judge, flashed counterfeit court papers. "We have emergency authorization under community bylaws. Interfere, and you'll be arrested for obstruction." He nodded to a man with a real police uniform, Officer Davis, known for taking bribes to look the other way. My stomach dropped. This wasn't part of our calculations. "Take the veteran to the community center for processing," Victoria ordered. "Mr. Mitchell, your legal stunts won't work this time. We've learned from Margaret's mistakes." Her smile was glacial. "Your grandfather's military service won't protect him, or you." As they forced Grandpa Joe into their van, his eyes met mine with a barely perceptible nod. "Trust the plan." But when Victoria handed me an envelope, my blood ran cold. Inside were photographs of every person who'd attended our strategy meetings, along with detailed personal information about their vulnerabilities. Mrs. Rodriguez's immigration paperwork, medical records for veterans in our support group. By midnight, your property deed transfers to the Association Trust, Victoria whispered. "Fight this, and everyone in those photos faces similar consequences. Your grandfather's health seems precarious for detention, doesn't it? Stress affects PTSD dramatically." The van drove away with Grandpa Joe inside. Neighbors retreated in fear. For the first time since this began, doubt crept in. Had I underestimated Victoria's resources? Had I placed my grandfather and neighbors in genuine danger? Everything hinged on what would happen in the next hour. 45 minutes remained before Victoria's midnight deadline. I retreated to my home office and activated the emergency protocol, a series of pre-scheduled actions we'd set up months ago for worst-case scenarios. First, encrypted messages, deployed to 7 different agencies simultaneously. Second, the backup server in Mrs. Rodriguez's attic activated, broadcasting our surveillance feeds to trusted recipients. Third, a file containing 3 months of meticulously documented evidence unlocked for our allies. I called Sarah Chen. Victoria took the bait but brought Officer Davis. "Accelerate the timeline." "Already on it," she replied. "Federal agents are standby. Keep broadcasting." The community center's security cameras, which we'd quietly upgraded last month, showed Grandpa Joe seated calmly while Victoria and Raymond paced. Their fake officers stood guard, tasers visible. Through hidden microphones, I heard Victoria's growing frustration. "The property transfer system is showing errors," she snapped at Raymond. "Mitchell must have legally encumbered the deed somehow." She leaned toward my grandfather. "Your grandson thinks he's clever, but he's just postponing the inevitable. Tell us what legal maneuvers he's planned." Grandpa Joe smiled slightly. "Back in Vietnam, we had a saying, the hunter becomes prey when he steps into a SEAL's territory. While Victoria interrogated Grandpa, I initiated Phase 2, a secure message to Judge Hamilton, who had been building a federal case against housing corruption. A call to the real sheriff's department, not Officer Davis's precinct. Most crucially, activation of the specialized recording devices Grandpa Joe wore beneath his veteran's cap and within his prosthetic knee brace, technology from his military connections that Victoria's security sweep had missed. The minutes ticked by. Victoria grew increasingly agitated as more computer errors blocked her property seizures. Unknown to her, every attempt generated forensic evidence of wire fraud across state lines. At 11:48 p.m., simultaneous events unfolded with military precision. Real police vehicles surrounded the community center. Federal agents appeared at the homes of Victoria's associates across 3 counties. The community center's emergency exit suddenly unlocked. Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter from inside. "Right. On schedule." "Something's wrong," Raymond warned Victoria, looking at his phone. "Davis says federal agents are at my house." Victoria's composure finally cracked. "Get the paper signed now. Force the old man." That's when the lights cut out, exactly as planned. In the momentary darkness, Grandpa Joe activated the military-grade strobe device in his watch. As a former SEAL, he'd prepared for the disorientation. Victoria's team hadn't. When emergency lights flickered on, Sheriff Martinez, not corrupt Officer Davis, stood in the doorway with deputies. Behind them came Sarah Chen with federal agents and Judge Hamilton with court officers. Most satisfying was the Channel 7 news crew we'd tipped off, cameras rolling. "Victoria Caldwell," Judge Hamilton announced, "you're under federal indictment for conspiracy, wire fraud, falsifying legal documents, and unlawful detention." Victoria lunged for the incriminating papers, but Raymond was already backing away. "This was all her idea," he stammered. "She said her development contacts would protect us." I rushed to Grandpa Joe, removing the zip ties. "You okay?" "Performed perfectly to plan," he whispered. "Got everything on the knee cam." As federal agents led Victoria away, I addressed the news cameras. Today marks the end of not just local corruption, but a statewide criminal enterprise targeting veterans and vulnerable homeowners. For the past year, we've worked with federal authorities to document how Victoria Caldwell's organization has seized properties through fraudulent HOA actions. Judge Hamilton stepped forward. "This operation has uncovered evidence implicating 12 HOA boards and 3 development companies in a housing fraud scheme. Mr. Mitchell's documentation provided the final evidence needed for federal prosecution." Victoria, finally realizing the magnitude of her defeat, snarled, "You set all this up. You wanted us to take your grandfather." "No," I corrected. "I gave you every opportunity to operate legally. You chose to target veterans and vulnerable homeowners. You chose to falsify documents. You chose to detain a decorated war hero." I pointed to Grandpa Joe, now standing tall despite the ordeal. "And most critically, you chose to ignore the warning we gave your sister last year. When you fight dirty against people who understand strategy, you'll lose everything." The federal agent leading Victoria away added, "The seizure of assets begins immediately. Initial estimates suggest over $30 million in illegally obtained property." 1 month after Victoria's arrest, our community gathered for a memorial dedication. Grandpa Joe unveiled the fountain he'd started building, now completed with the names of fallen veterans from our neighborhood's families. The once divisive project had become a symbol of our community's resilience. The federal case expanded beyond our expectations. 27 HOA boards statewide were under investigation. Senator Collins introduced legislation named the Mitchell Act, requiring transparency in homeowners associations and prohibiting private security forces impersonating law enforcement. You transformed a neighborhood dispute into statewide reform, Mrs. Rodriguez told me, as residents mingled freely, no longer afraid of arbitrary rules or retaliation. Later that evening, Grandpa Joe and I sat on the porch watching fireflies. "You know what today proves?" he asked, his voice strong despite all he'd endured. "That justice can defeat corruption," I ventured. "That preparation beats power," he corrected. "Victoria had money, connections, and ruthlessness. We had documentation, strategy, and community." He pointed to the homes around us, where American flags, garden gnomes, and children's toys now existed without fear of citations. This is what we protected. Not just property rights, but the freedom to live with dignity. If you're facing HOA abuse, remember, document everything, build alliances, know the law, and never underestimate the power of a well-set trap.